Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coffee and Conversations with in Chicago, Better Support, Better Outcomes. We're so thrilled to have you all here with us. We're going to go over some quick housekeeping and logistical items first. All participants are in listen only mode at the time. You will be allowed to turn on your audio a little bit later. You are welcome to turn on your video at any point during this lovely program. We would love to remind you all about the upcoming walk this May 7th at 9:30 a.m. in Chicago. You can find the information online. You're welcome to scan that QR code there or go to beaconwalk.org to get more information and register. We hope you'll all join us. We would love to thank today's sponsors, Merck, PhotoCure, Genentech, Bristol Myers Squibb, and the EMD Serono Pfizer partnership. Without their support, it's impossible for us to do this sort of programming. They also help support the goodies that we'll be sending you in the mail after this program. We also have a couple of other fun announcements. The first is that there is a support group at Northwestern Medicine, and it meets on the third Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. There's also a female only support group on the first Thursday of the month at 12 p.m. We hope to see you all there. This is offered virtually, and you can email Mary Kate at marykate.keeter@nm.org to register. You will need a link to join. Much like today, it's an individual link, but it's free to join. We also hope to see you at our March 19th Coffee and Conversations, Better Care, Better Outcomes, which is at 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Central Time. And this will feature experts like Dr. Joshua Meeks, Dr. Randy Swice, Dr. Tan, and several others who are going to talk about what better care can do for bladder cancer patients. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Kate.
Perfect. Thanks, Morgan. So on behalf of Northwestern and the Polsky Urologic Cancer Institute, I want to welcome all of you and thank you for attending tonight's event. I also want to thank Beacon for hosting and for setting this up, and the other patient advocacy organizations who you'll hear from shortly. So originally, we wanted to host this webinar series as a way to celebrate the one-year launch of our bladder cancer support groups at Northwestern. But more importantly, we want to showcase the vast resources that are available to bladder cancer patients in Chicago and beyond. So we'll kick off tonight's event with our keynote speaker, Mandi Buss. Mandi is a licensed clinical social worker with the Northwestern Medicine Supportive Oncology Program. Mandi joined Northwestern in September 2020, where she provides psychosocial care to urologic oncology and gynecology oncology patients. Prior to joining Northwestern, Mandi worked at Memorial Sloan Kettering in pediatric and adult oncology, both inpatient and outpatient services. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mandi.
Thanks so much, Mary Kate, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. Looking forward to spending some time with you tonight. We're going to spend some time on the topic of well-being, especially in the context of bladder cancer, and identifying a few resources that might be useful in navigating that experience. I'm going to pull up my screen, so bear with me one moment. Okay. And when I say cancer experience, I mean that whether the experience is as a patient in active treatment, someone preparing for or recovering from surgery, a patient navigating survivorship or managing advanced disease, or also as a caregiver for someone with bladder cancer. My aim is to touch on a few of the more prevalent or more common needs that arise throughout that arc and set the stage for a more in-depth look at these resources in the presentations that follow. And just a brief note on why cultivating life. I think it's because we're going to be exploring some tools for really nurturing all aspects of your life and yourself and caring for truly all parts of you and your relationships as you're managing cancer. So we're talking about the whole picture. And there's a rich garden metaphor in here that I'll ask you to indulge me in a bit along the way. So first and foremost, it's important to note that we don't experience aspects of well-being separately. These are all pieces of the whole you, who you are, how you experience your life, how you move through the world. Not one single piece of this represents the whole picture, and this isn't an exhaustive list. As a social worker, my professional focus is really in the realm of what we would call psychosocial care. And when some folks want to get really fancy with it, we can even say biopsychosocial spiritual care. But the idea is the same. The psycho of the psychosocial is the you, and the social of psychosocial is your environment, your world, and your relationships. So the idea is that each aspect impacts the others and affects the whole picture. One way to think of it is kind of like a table. So if one leg is a little short, if things are off kilter, the whole table can get wobbly and off balance until you shove a coaster under the leg or fix the table altogether. And it's not so different with understanding the body. Nothing in the body exists in isolation. Our body is a complex system of interrelated aspects. And to revisit the garden metaphor, think of all the factors that contribute to healthy plants. You need healthy soil, healthy sun, water. No part is separate from the other. So, tonight, when we're talking about supporting wellness, um, it can be useful to think about specific areas where you might benefit and understand that supporting each of those areas can really benefit the whole. And just a reminder, too, that the whole is greater than the sum of each of those parts. And how might bladder cancer impact overall wellness? I'm definitely preaching to the choir on this one. I know many of you can speak exactly to this, but it's helpful too to consider the evolution of cancer treatment and trajectories. There's been a big shift from cancer as being life or death, cure or no cure, to really moving into a longer term trajectory. So we're thinking about surgery and long-term impacts, living with advanced cancer. The trajectory looks so different. So when we're talking about wellness, you're not only managing the physical changes, symptoms, and side effects, kind of those obvious physical pieces, but also some offshoots of that, changes in your body image and self-esteem and identity, potential sexual dysfunction, whether mentally or physically, just by experiencing those changes in your body or experiencing the way your body functions differently, can also impact how you relate to others or even yourself sexually. Of course, there's the financial toxicity of treatment. Financial effects can be quite pervasive in the world of cancer, whether it's unpaid time off of work or loss of income for patients and caregivers, to medication costs or insurance copays, and even down to things like childcare or parking expenses or other indirect costs. In the social realm, cancer can lend itself to a kind of social isolation, particularly if there are people in your life who can't quite understand what you're going through, or if you're feeling really alone in that experience. And when we're thinking about partnerships, even the shift in roles, maybe from being a spouse to becoming a patient, being a spouse to becoming a caregiver, and trying to integrate those pieces. That's so much to manage, and some of those changes can contribute to new conflict where you might not have experienced it before. For many people going through cancer, whether it's because of physical changes, changes to routine, or even changes in mood, um, there might be some impact on how you engage with the things that brought you joy before, whether it's work, hobbies, or other aspects of your routine. And there are so many normal emotional ups and downs that come with a cancer trajectory, very, very normal responses to changes in stress and loss. On a different level, there can also be mental health changes that emerge, whether it's maybe an episode of depression that's triggered or experiencing anxiety the way you've never experienced it before in the context of cancer. And then there's also kind of the gestalt of it, which is your overall feeling of satisfaction with your life, your narrative around your life, um, kind of that story that you identify of how your life feels to you moment to moment. So it's not to say that any one person going through the cancer experience as a patient or caregiver necessarily experiences an issue in every single domain, but it's important to recognize that so many aspects of life can be touched by the cancer experience, and that they're all kind of interdependent. In a nutshell, diagnosis and treatment can really blow up a person's assumptive world, which is to say that everything you assumed about your life or your relationships, the way things work, the way you move through the world, the reality you had before is changed. And there's a lot of loss that comes with that change. It's a very tangible, real loss, and one that ultimately will need to be grieved in one way, shape, or form. And learning how to deal with things that were never a part of your plan or identity before. Which kind of brings us to the topic of adjustment and coping. How do you settle into a new reality? I know, I think the phrase a new normal kind of evokes a different response depending on who you're talking to. It's either the perfect phrase for this new phase, this new part of your life you're in, or it's the worst thing that's ever hit your ears because there is nothing normal about this experience. In either case, it's a lot to cope with. So whether you are at diagnosis, moving through treatment, managing a change in the treatment plan, moving into survivorship, moving along the path of survivorship from more frequent follow-up to less frequent follow-up, or managing more advanced illness, adjustment is always at play, especially in those acute transition points. Adjustment is the ongoing process in which an individual tries to manage emotional distress, solve specific cancer-related problems, and gain mastery of or control over cancer-related life events. I think for many people, it can be tempting to think of adjustment as an on or off switch. Like, have you adjusted to your diagnosis yet? But really, it's a process. It's growth, and it involves some forward movement and change over time. For folks who find themselves having trouble adjusting, that might mean feeling kind of stuck in the feelings and emotions of diagnosis or the emotions of that treatment transition point, for example. Coping, on the other hand, is the action of putting effort into solving personal and interpersonal cancer-related problems to either master, minimize, or tolerate stress and challenging feelings. So this is really the verb. Adjustment is that bigger process. The coping is the doing of it. When we talk about coping strategies and coping skills, we're talking about your tools for that doing. And there are countless ways to cope. What works for one person might not work for another person. Some of the kind of easiest examples within reach would be things like distraction, talking with friends, reading, researching, sleeping, breathing, meditation. Researching is a great example. I think for some people, there's so much control to be found in pulling up that information, learning more about what's going on. For others, that can be a very slippery slope and one that contributes to heightened anxiety or heightened distress. And we have different categories of coping, things that are emotion focused versus social types of coping, humor, denial, avoidance. These are likely all terms you've heard before. And speaking very generally, there are some gender divides when it comes to coping strategies. Research tends to show that men are more inclined to use problem-focused coping, more solution-focused. It's a common topic in marriage counseling, for example. One partner would like to vent and just be heard in the frustration. The other partner is trying to fix it. And I think part of that is societal standards encouraging men to be a bit more individualistic and action-oriented. Research has conversely shown that women tend to be more in that emotionally focused realm, that social realm of talking it out, connecting with friends, connecting with loved ones, and doing more of that processing and really working through the feelings of it. And not all categories of coping skills are created equal. We have strategies like avoidance, denial, substance abuse. Sometimes these serve an important purpose for a time. Survival strategies can carry you through a difficult time, but survival strategies often aren't very adaptive or healthy or useful as a long-term strategy. When we think of, for example, maybe compartmentalization, kind of the ability to set an issue aside and keep moving forward, that can be so helpful for some people at the start of treatment, at the start of diagnosis. But ultimately, down the road, there has to be some space to reintegrate your experience and revisit those experiences. For that reason, I think denial kind of gets a bad rap. There is some benefit to the fluctuating awareness of dealing with cancer and living with cancer. It's okay to have moments where you are going in and out of knowing that you have cancer. It's a little too heavy, I think, to hold that sense of your mortality or those fears related to your trajectory, moment to moment, day to day. So coming in and out of that is perfectly natural. Um, so one of the biggest things I just want to touch on is that difference between strategies that would be adaptive and strategies that would be maladaptive. When we say maladaptive, we're thinking about anything that becomes a hindrance to your day-to-day functioning, whether that's how you connect with people, whether you're able to engage in work, engage in the things you enjoy, the quality of your relationships. And what does good coping look like? It looks like well-being. It looks pretty balanced. It does not mean the absence of feelings like sadness, anger, grief, and frustration, but rather the ability to hold these feelings and other positive feelings like happiness, gratitude, and joy. It's not either or. You can still have negative feelings, difficult moments, challenging situations, and conflict. And what does this mean for individuals, couples, and families? Same as with your own internal table, thinking about that as a system or one leg causing the whole table to be off balance. The system between couples, the system among families is very similar. If one person in a relationship or a relational system is impacted and struggling, you're going to feel it across that system. I think this can be particularly challenging when it comes to a partnership where one partner becomes the patient, one becomes the caregiver. Those are two new roles you're introducing into a relationship that change the dynamic quite a bit. I think many folks are surprised to find that they're struggling in that situation, but at the same time, it's an enormous shift, and it's perfectly reasonable that it would take some time to figure out how to navigate those new roles, especially when you're in the midst of managing a diagnosis and other stressors that could come into play. So in a second here, we're going to jump into a nice overview of some of the go-to resources for folks managing this trajectory with bladder cancer. A few questions to keep in mind as we go. Exploring resources can be kind of overwhelming in and of itself, especially if you're in the midst of actively adjusting and trying to cope. There's so much out there, and it can be hard to know where to start. Along the way, these are a few things we'll just keep in mind as you're reflecting on your own experience. Can I identify areas within myself and my life where I might benefit from additional support? So when you're thinking about your facets of well-being, the facets of who you are, where are you struggling the most? Where do you find you've been hit the hardest and in the most need of support? And what are my most immediate needs? So figuring out how to prioritize what those needs are. So these first two questions are really about providing some shape to something that can feel very shapeless and overwhelming. I think it's not uncommon to feel that inner wish to have some help, to have some support. And these can really help us narrow down a more specific ask to make better use of our social supports and resources. And who can help me or help us as a couple, as a family, identify and access useful tools. This could be the people in your inner circle, your friends, your community, your spiritual groups, your oncology social worker. There are a lot of potential inroads to getting that help and linking up with tools It's important to kind of identify where you're comfortable going, who you would feel comfortable reaching out to. And, and last but not least, I think it's important to mention that resources are not a one size fits all. Um, when we're thinking about our tool shed, so to speak, that space can be limited. And it's important to kind of pick up tools that you find personally useful and valuable. Which ones are worth that space? Because ultimately, you're using them to tend to your garden, your life, your coping, and your resilience. It doesn't matter what your neighbor has in their shed. Every garden's different. So, some tools that might serve someone else who's on the same cancer trajectory and may become highly recommended with some high pressure sales tactics because people become quite attached to the things that work well for them. Those things might not support your specific needs or your personality or your family. One example that comes to mind is support groups. Um, Oftentimes, when I bring up the topic of support groups with folks, yeah, I'm met with a strong reaction either way. People either know they want to connect that way and hear about other people's journeys, share their own journey, and other folks know that they're not about that, that they'd like to share space with people who understand it, but they don't want to talk about it that way. And that's okay. So now that we dive into some resources, I want to start by highlighting the types of resources that can help you manage all of your social resources. So this is a resource for resources. Some women and caregivers, men might be fortunate enough to have a large support network, maybe near and far, but this can come with its own unique challenges. So when we're thinking about how to organize that support, I want to use these two organizations just as an example. There are endless options out there at this point, some that are more modernized and look a little more Instagram-y. So it kind of runs the whole gamut. These two have been around for a long time and are kind of tried and true go-to resources. So these platforms make it easier to communicate with anyone who wants to keep tabs on how you're doing and helps you delegate some tasks, like lining up some help, lining up meals. It can really streamline some of the communication, especially for folks who feel like they're constantly managing text messages, calls, and emails looking for updates about how they're doing or treatment updates. This can be helpful in even delegating the role of managing this to a trusted family member or loved one. It can take also some of the awkwardness or overwhelm out of the how can I help exchange and make it a little easier to accept the help of others. On these sites, you can identify the need, whether it's mowing the lawn, cleaning the house, getting a ride to an appointment, doing the laundry, and people can sign up. So it makes that transaction feel a little more clear, a little more comfortable. Oh, and I should mention at the end of the presentation, I'll drop a complete list of all the resources I'm mentioning into the chat box. So don't feel like if I'm moving too fast, don't feel like you have to catch everything. I'll make sure you have all the info. And whether your circle of support, your group of friends, your family is large or small, bladder cancer can feel very isolating at times, especially if no one shares this experience. Sometimes even friends with cancer might not be able to quite relate to your experience with bladder cancer. So this can come with unique challenges and impacts, and that's whether you're a patient or a caregiver. This is where peer support, whether it's through mentorship or support groups, can make a difference. And starting with mentorship programs, these types of programs connect people with cancer and also caregivers, specifically these two, with a trained peer mentor. So someone who's walked a similar path before and can provide some really unique, personalized support from the lens of experience and from the lens of knowing. The matching process takes many factors into account. I won't say too much about it. I don't want to steal Immerman Angels' thunder, but Immerman Angels, along with BCAN, offer these one-on-one opportunities to get more support. And there is so much potential here. And I I've worked with some people who are reluctant to engage this because they don't know if they want to enter into a long relationship with a mentor. Uh, I want to reassure you that you can use these tools however you want to. So I have some folks who have made shorter connections, a conversation, a couple conversations, and have really valued that, but didn't feel the need to carry it further. And others that have made lifelong connections. And on the topic of social support, we're going to move into the category of cancer resource centers. These are organizations that are really an avenue of getting plugged into a community of people who get it. And the cool thing is that you can connect at whatever level you need, whatever level you're comfortable with. So centers host support groups, and the theme of support groups run the whole gamut. You have groups specifically for people in active treatment, groups that are diagnosis specific, groups that are more social, groups for caregivers and the related stresses of caregiving, and groups for survivorship and managing fear of recurrence, and groups for folks dealing with active disease and advanced disease. And as I had mentioned, it's a great way to connect for community. Many of these organizations offer an abundance of wellness and recreational activities. And there is something so healing about engaging in something like improv or a journaling group or Tai Chi, not to talk about cancer, but to do these activities with people who understand the unique challenges that come with cancer. It's also an amazing opportunity to connect to learn. These programs offer workshops and seminars on topics of interest, everything from I'm thinking of programs on reconnecting with nature, nutrition, exercise, latest research. It's overflowing with opportunities to gain new knowledge. The most common program offerings across all the cancer resource centers are going to be in that area of support, wellness, and I've noticed some of the more common themes tend to be around stress management, whether it's mindfulness and meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, some exercise programming, nutrition programming, and other groups. When you're looking around, especially now that so many things are virtual, it can be helpful to consider location, especially if that's on your mind for the future, and also helpful to look at the programming that's available at any given time. I think it's so much easier now to access a wide range of programs across the board. I have patients who visit a number of centers now concurrently and really benefit from the programming. So here's an overview of the centers around Chicagoland, as well as one in Munster, Indiana, which you'll be hearing more about soon. So we have Gilda's Club downtown, kind of the OG program here. We have Living Well in Geneva, which is part of Northwestern Medicine, Wellness House in Hinsdale, in many locations across Chicagoland, Cancer Wellness Center up north, Cancer Support Center down south, Homewood, Illinois. And I've had patients attend programs at every single one of these centers and have incredible feedback. Many folks who have been surprised at how valuable they have found that connection to be. Even something as simple, I had mentioned an improv class, but I'm thinking of someone who had even just joined an improv class, no discussion of cancer, but she found that experience so valuable and so healing. In terms of physical changes and appearance throughout the cancer experience, many of the resources for adjusting to those changes tend to be geared towards women. So I'll list those here. Sephora offers Brave Beauty in the Face of Cancer class for confidence, where you can get new skills for doing makeup or learning about products, whether it's makeup or skincare that can be useful. And then there's also Look Good, Feel Better. So they have virtual workshops on beauty techniques, a program finder where you can locate something nearby, and a beauty guide. I also have a long list of wig resources, head cover resources in the area that I'll drop into the chat box at the end of this as well. And while these are geared towards women, I do want to highlight for a moment that this is not an issue that only impacts women. I think anytime the issue of changes in appearance, changes in the body, whether it's surgery or chemo, whenever it comes up, people often feel a need to undermine the weight of that and say, oh, this sounds so vain. I'm so worried about losing my hair. Oh, this sounds so vain. It's a scarf, but the trade-off is having my cancer managed and being alive, as if you can't be grateful and also grieve the loss of the body you had before, or the loss of your hair. The physical aspect of the self, it is one of the core pieces of identity. It's not the only piece, but it is certainly okay to give it the weight that it deserves and understand that any change you're managing in that realm, any loss you're grieving in that realm is perfectly valid. Oh no, hold on. My PowerPoint just shut down. Hold on. Bear with me. Bear with me just a moment.
Mandy, if you want, I have your slides open.
That would be great. Thank you.
Let me put them in full screen.
Okay.
Just let me know when you want me to click.
Sure. I think we can go to slide 15.
Is this it, Mandy?
Hold on. Yep, there we are. Okay. Sorry. I'm just gonna move this right here. Okay. So now thinking more about the realm of financial, legal, and practical concerns, and I think oftentimes these are the concerns that folks find the most stressful in navigating. Some of the emotional stuff I think makes more sense. It's a little more intuitive. There is nothing intuitive about Medicare. There is nothing intuitive about navigating employment laws. There's nothing intuitive about any of these systems that we're dealing with. These are my go-to resources. Huge wealth of information and support to be found here. So Triage Cancer, again, not looking to steal any thunder, but earmark this as the go-to for some of the biggest financial and legal concerns that can come up, whether it's Medicare and health insurance, estate planning, finances, disability insurance, some of those trickier systems to navigate. Similarly, we have cancer and careers, which is exactly what you would think it would be for. This is for navigating cancer and employment. The goal is supporting people so they can thrive in the workplace. So this would be an excellent resource when you're navigating issues like FMLA, workplace accommodations, how to talk to your coworkers, how to talk to your manager. Are you disclosing these things or are you not? Navigating work during treatment, retirement, re-entering the workplace, and other legal and financial concerns. And I also want to throw out a line for Cancer Care's Helping Hand resource guide for cancer patients. This is a great kind of meta database for all the local and national resources where you can filter by diagnosis type, location, or need. It's everything from copays, financial assistance, food, wigs, transportation. There's probably 3 dozen different types of issues that you can sort by. Next. Next, thank you. So on a similar-ish topic, when we're talking about financial toxicity of treatment, some of these medications can be very challenging to pay for and manage financially. I'm excited to share that the Bladder Cancer Fund through PAN Foundation is currently open. These funds are not often open, and I was surprised to see it when I was looking it up. So do take note if you have Medicare, if you're under 500% of the federal poverty level, if you're on one of those main medications that really runs up the bill, look into this program. It's easy enough to apply online. HealthWell also has similar disease-related funds. Right now, the open fund they have that I thought would be the most relevant to share is their cancer-related behavioral health fund, where folks can apply for up to $2,000 of assistance for copays for medication, therapy, and transportation. So this would cover antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, counseling, psychiatry visits. The criteria is having a cancer-related behavioral health need, being under the 500% federal poverty level, and having insurance that covers those services or prescriptions. And this fund is also open. Next. And 2 more prescription assistance programs. GoodRx has most medications on their site where you can look up. Sometimes it's cheaper than your insurance. Oftentimes, probably, and it varies by locations. You can search all the pharmacies in your area to get the best deal. The one caveat that I really want to throw out, especially for folks on Medicare, is that using a GoodRx coupon might not count towards your deductible under Medicare, but you can mail in your receipt if you want it to count. It's just a little more complicated. Similar, Needy Meds. You can look up your medication to see if there's a patient assistance program through the drug manufacturer. The drug manufacturer programs, PAPs, those patient assistance programs, are great for folks on Medicare without Part D, folks with Part D who are facing outrageous copays, and folks who are uninsured. You can also look up copay assistance cards and other funds by Needy Meds as well. And I had mentioned a few times that 500% of the federal poverty level. I wanted to provide a chart just to give you a clear picture of what that looks like based on family size. Some folks have been surprised to see that they are eligible for programs that they thought they would have made too much money for, or somehow been over the limit for. So just in case this is a helpful reference for you. Oh, so 400 and 500 tend to be the typical range for a lot of these programs. PAN and HealthWell use the 500. And while we're on the topic of Medicare, not only does Triage Cancer have some great quick guides on the topic of Medicare and all aspects of those plans, but you can get free Medicare counseling. This is a federal initiative that is carried out by each state under the same acronym, but different words in every state. It's SHIP everywhere. So this is the information for connecting that with that in Illinois, Indiana, and how you can look it up if you live in a different state. And finally, how do you access therapy and counseling services? It can always be useful to start with your hospital connections and your local cancer resource centers. Some of those cancer resource centers do offer short-term counseling for patients and caregivers, so please check there first. And as far as the hospital, sometimes oncology social workers have the capacity to do some counseling, or at the very least can point you in the direction of an internal or external resource where you can get that support. If you're looking to figure it out on your own, you can use a tool like Psychology Today. Many therapy providers are listed on this site. You can search by issue, whether it's pain, chronic illness, cancer, couples, men's issues, women's issues, therapy type, insurance, and more. And thinking more specifically about how cancer can impact the body, sense of self, and how that can impact relationships, I also want to highlight how you can go about finding sex therapy, which is talk therapy related to issues of intimacy, sexuality, connection, and how you experience your own body. These are two organizations where you can find information for local sex therapists who would specialize in working through these types of issues. And you don't need to be coupled to access this type of support. And just another note here, not to forget about the assistance for behavioral health needs. And don't forget about your clinic supports. There is an abundance at every institution. In our program here at Northwestern, we offer much of this under our supportive oncology program. Oncology social work, figure out who your social worker is and connect with them, especially if you don't know where to start. Not only can social work be useful for that supportive counseling piece, but really working as a switchboard to connect you with the right relevant supports inside the hospital and out. Everything from health psychology, psychiatry, nutrition counseling, tobacco cessation, financial counseling, sexual health, chaplaincy and spiritual care, integrative medicine. So that's massage, acupuncture, supplements, Chinese medicine, and palliative medicine. And I wanted to include palliative medicine because it's tempting to think of this as an end of life support. Palliative medicine is for anyone managing an illness, a chronic illness. It does not have to be a terminal trajectory, but the focus is on symptom management. So if symptom management is a complex aspect of your trajectory, ask for this added piece. And I'll wrap up with a couple reminders. If someone in your life is offering support, experiment with leaning into that. Oftentimes the experience of providing care for someone or helping someone, especially if that person is a friend, a family member, a loved one, that is gratifying and a reward of its own. And it's okay to be clear in outlining your needs and how people could help. Delegate small and simple tasks like chores, meals, or cleaning. You don't have to wait until you experience a crisis to access support. Proactive coping goes a long way. You can intentionally cultivate that resilience, build some familiarity with the support team, and kind of know who your safety net is. And you don't, again, need to know exactly what type of support to ask for. It's okay to reach out to your social worker to clarify your needs and next steps. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure being here with you all tonight. Appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you so much, Mandi. And that was so great and so comprehensive. We are so appreciative of you sharing your knowledge and expertise with us this evening.